Oh, there's one more person, and then we'll go ahead and get started. Right, I'm just gonna stop everyone's video so we have a full screen, and this is recording, and it'll be up on the YouTube channel at some point when I get to it. So, hi everyone, I am Regina Edwards. I'm the founder of the Lawyer on the Beach Facebook group, which is a group that started in 2019 that nobody had any interest in because it was about virtual lawyering. And then COVID hit, and people were like, "Oh crap, I need to learn how to work from not the office." So it's exploded in a pretty good way, which is nice. And I wanted to put on this coaching series because people are always asking questions about coaches. So I figured a good way to handle that is have a coach talk about a particular topic, so you get to learn their style. And then, or if you're just a lurker and you just want to pick up tidbits, do that too. And then that way it'll just be on the YouTube channel for everyone to see later. So today we have Allison Williams, who is the founder of the Williams Law Group. That is a law firm in New Jersey that deals with matrimonial and family issues. And she has been board certified, and she built her firm up from a startup to a multi-million-dollar business within only 3.5 years. So she decided to take her expertise and start a second successful business, which is Law Firm Mentor, which I know her whole elevator speech, but it's about crushing chaos because it's really cool. So her job is to help her clients, law firm owners, basically crush chaos in their firms by implementing different systems. And she does retreats, she does a whole bunch of stuff. And she's awesome. And she smells really good because I've met her. So take it away, Alice.
All right, thank you for that intro. I'm going to share my screen so we can dive right in. And just a little bit about today, some preliminaries. So we're going to talk for a good portion of time about getting the right team and delegation. Then we're going to open up the floor for Q&A. So anything that you guys want to ask me, for those of you that have heard me speak before, you know I like to talk to an audience. So feel free to drop your questions in the chat as we go, but I'm probably going to hold them until the Q&A section so I can make sure that we get through as much as we can today. And the final thing I'm going to tell you guys is that the slide deck will be made available. There is a link in the end of this program. I will share it with you guys, and I will put it in the chat for those of you that are here live, so you can access it, because there is a lot here that is both preliminary to, substantively about, and a follow-up to what we're going to talk about. And I want to make sure you have that as a resource. So with that, Regina already gave you the gist of my company. So I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on that, just letting you know that we help lawyers to do 3 things, super important: growing revenue, crushing chaos in business, and making more money. And those are not the same thing. So growing revenue is about having enough in your business that you can buy yourself convenience and you don't have to work like a slave. Crushing chaos is about systematizing everything in the business so you are not required for it. And then finally, making more money is just that. Making more money is about enjoying the fruits of your labor and being able to live an abundant life without having to trade your time for money, right? The industry of law trades time for money, but that does not mean a business owner has to do that. And we very much encourage our clients not to create that, even if you want a lawyer full time. So with that, here is the agenda of the slide deck, but we're going to talk about some very specific things. And the first thing I want to let you guys know about is that even though we're talking today to law firm owners, everything that I'm going to share with you are things that I have shared to other organizations as well. So I have lectured for many, many years on these topics, long before I started Law Firm Mentor, and continuously since. So I've given this presentation to the University of West Florida. I have given it to Vistage. I have given it to the Society of Human Resource Managers, also known as SHARM. And so these are not strategies that I want you to think about as law strategies. These are business strategies to allow you to create the type of team and the type of work with your team that gets you out of being necessary to your work. And you might say, how is that possible? I'm a lawyer. How can any lawyer ever get out of legal work? Well, obviously, there are things that are legal work that lawyers do. And then there are things that paraprofessionals do and that other people will do in your business. And if you are trying to create a sustainable business, whether you want to be the only lawyer in the company that has other people doing things for you, Or you want to be one of many lawyers in your company, but you don't want to be the person who is required to manage, supervise, organize, do the work alongside other lawyers. You want them lawyering and you want to be free of that. You need to have solid people and they need to work in a certain way to accomplish that. So that's what we're talking about today. All right. So first up, want to make sure that we always start with the mindset of getting the right team. I'm going to talk about this very briefly, but this is really the core of everything that we talk about in Law Firm Mentor. You have to build from the place of what you desire to create. If you just start hiring people, or you just start saying, I want more money, or I want more time, and you do anything desperately to get that, you will probably get better than you have now, but you're probably not going to ultimately get what you want. This is how super, super successful people can create a whole huge business, be really thrilled by how much money they have, but they're working 90 hours a week and they're worn out and they can't get profitable and they're exhausted. That tends to happen when we don't lay out the plan that has to both create time and money contemporaneously. So what we're talking about today is really going to be maximizing both of those at the same time. We always start with an ask as to what you want in your business. And I don't mean what you want in terms of I want to be successful and I want to have America's next top estate planning law firm, etc. I'm talking about what you want in terms of your life. You have to start with your life and then build your business to fit that. So if you desire to only work 20 hours a week, do not assume that that means you will have half as much revenue or half as much profit as someone who works 40 hours a week. You have to start with the idea that what you're going to create is going to create abundance for you in time or money or both. That's typically what lawyers want when they come to us. And that you're going to create that through a system, which we're going to talk about in just a moment. Now, the other thing I want to be very clear on is that you have to ask yourself why you want what you want. Because that guiding principle is typically going to give you options beyond what you say you want. So lawyers will come to us and they'll say, you know, I think I want a law firm with 3 to 5 lawyers. I want to work about 25 hours a week. I'd like to make about $400,000 a year. So that sounds doable, right? And it's absolutely doable. But when you ask why the lawyer wants that, what you'll usually find is that they'll say something like, I want time with my kids. I want to take only high profile cases. I want to enjoy the work that I do with only a few select clients. And I want to have status notoriety that comes with having a firm beyond myself. So when you get to the why, you can then start creating things that don't necessarily limit the lawyer to how many hours they think they have to work. They can usually work a lot less. And they'll usually open up doors for them to create streams of revenue that are existing beyond themselves that they haven't even contemplated. So when we figure out the why, right, there's a whole lot of things that we got to talk about. We're going to talk about leadership and management. This is kind of baked into the mindset of how you're going to approach this. But ultimately, we're here to talk about team. So we're going to spend time talking about that right now. So when we think about the team that you want, you have to ask yourself when you're going to hire. And everybody wants to know, when is it the right time to hire, right? If you are a team of 1 and you want to expand beyond 1, or you're a team of 50 and you're ready to think about going into your next stratosphere, you're still going to have to ask yourself when. So here are some key indicators as to when you will need to hire. So first, you want to know how work flows through your business. Now, this is not simply knowing that a lawyer does X and a paralegal does Y and a secretary does Z. This is really about knowing at what stage of the case you're going to enter, how many hours and tasks are within each portion of work. If you're phasing out your work, like if you do flat fees like Regina, you're probably going to want to know things like, at what point do I enter and exit a stage of a case? And how are my stages broken down? And who does what within each stage? So one of the things that we give our clients as a resource is a thing called a SKU, which essentially is an itemization of everything that happens from start to finish in every phase of every part of every case that you handle in your law firm. You need to create that as somewhat of the Bible or Torah or Quran of your business. In other words, you need to know where work is going to ultimately be delegated, because if you don't know that, you don't know when you need a paralegal versus a lawyer versus a secretary, right? You just start saying, I need a body, somebody to take some of this work off my plate. But sometimes we overhire, right? You hire a lawyer when you really could have gotten away with a paralegal who costs a lot less. And sometimes you hire a secretary because you think that the type of work you have is administrative, when if you had hired a little bit higher with a paralegal, that person could be both making money as they are taking administrative work off your plate, and they could also do some of the lower level lawyer work that really isn't lawyer work. So you have to think about how your work flows through your business. Now, for most law firms, once you get to 75% saturation on your work, you are typically going to need to hire somebody. And what I mean by that is, if you're at a state of saying there are things you can't get to, most lawyers at some point get to the, I've got too much on my plate, I just don't know how I'm going to get it all done, I'm shifting between marketing and lawyering, or there's so much work, I've got multiple employees, we are still in a state of too much work for too many people and all the work's not getting done. Usually, lawyers work harder first and then decide to hire. But I want to shift your paradigm and get you into thinking that once you're at a place where you are getting 3 out of 4 of the things done on your plate on a regular basis, think in the average month, 3 weeks out of 4 weeks, you are likely to get 3 out of 4 things done that you have on your list. Once you hit those numbers, right, this is an easy mental hack for you to decide things. Once you get there, it is very easy for you to economically afford another person, even if you can't see that. And I can walk you through the math on that at another time in another stage when we have a little more time. But ultimately, what you're really doing is you're taking that 25%. That 25% is almost always a gross underestimation of what you actually have. Because what normally happens is we do as lawyers the things we have to do. We don't do all the things we could do, right? So if you are in an area where your clients are in court, right? This is different between litigators and transactional attorneys, but just think about this globally, right? If you're in a court matter, there are times where you would need to sit down and explain things to your clients. Well, are you explaining them in an email, in a phone call, or in a letter? Are you explaining them in person? If you explain things in person, they're typically going to have questions. That's going to expand the time that's needed. Versus if you shoot them an email, they will have to soak up that information. Sometimes they'll shoot a long email back. Sometimes they'll respond with, got it. But it's not a back and forth, right? So there are ways to expand and contract the time that you're spending with a person that gives them a greater level of service. Typically, people are happier to spend money, rather paying for your time and engaging with you than simply getting your letters, your phone calls, et cetera, because that's not what they hired you for, right? They hired you for legal counsel. So when you are counseling them, you are more likely to get them to pay your bills because they're happy to. And you're more likely to get a client who is happier in the process. We know clients are not happy. Clients come to us when something's wrong, but they're more likely to be less dissatisfied with you when they're engaging with you. And then the final thing I want you to think about when it's time to hire is if you are marketing, selling, and not getting to your work, you are at the point of being past due. Because most lawyers don't stop the legal work. Most lawyers stop the marketing and the selling, right? They book their consults further out. They say, all right, I'll just put a hiatus on taking folks in. They'll say, all right, I don't have time to go network right now because we have ethical obligations. But at some point, your work is going to run out. So the one thing you have to keep in mind is that if you are in a business, you cannot stop marketing and selling. You have to get them all in. And with that obligation as a business owner, if you're marketing, selling, and have legal work, someone else can do your legal work. Someone else can also do your marketing and selling. But typically, you're going to want to get, if you're trying to grow, other people to do legal work, because the marketing and selling is more likely to stay in your company and create an asset, your growing business as your asset, than if you get simply more work on your plate. Because once the work is off your plate, client has no more relationship with you unless you are marketing to them continuously after the work is done on that case.
So Allison, how do you respond to people that have questions like, I don't think anyone can do the legal work as well as I do it, and that's why I don't want to delegate. So how do you respond when people say that?
Oh, I love hearing that. I love it. I love it. I love it. First of all, I used to be that person. I used to say that all the time.
Oh yeah, me too.
Because I have a very big reputation in New Jersey, right? And it took a long time for me to divorce my ego from the idea that people needed to have the America's Next Top Lawyer, right? They're coming for the show, they're coming for the name and all those things. The reality is most legal work is not so sophisticated that you have to be involved. Now, you may want to be involved. You might get a lot of satisfaction from being involved, But do you need to be the person that is calculating child support guidelines? Do you need to be the person who's filling in the forms for the basic estate plan? Do you need to be the person who is filling out the affidavits for immigration purposes? Most likely not. Clients have an attachment to you in large part because what you are putting out is about you. When you start to shift your messaging from being about you to being about the brand that is your company, your work product, your process, your reputation, because your name is still on the letterhead, even if you're not the one who's showing up in court, right? If the brand gets strong enough, and there's a whole process we can teach you about building brand, then ultimately clients will learn not to come for you. But they're going to come for you if you put you out there, because you're offering yourself up on a platter. That's what they're going to want. So you have to shift that messaging, and there's a very detailed process of shifting that messaging, whether you are stepping out of legal work or you're going to just precipitously stop one day. And we've had clients do both. We've had clients do both very successfully, even when the law firm's name is the law office of blank blank, right? People want blank blank. People don't want blank blank's associate. So you can't create a dichotomy whereby you are offering up the law office of blank blank so that blank blank is the person that's wanted, and then they get a knockoff, which is their associate. You have to create a brand around what they're going to buy so that they buy that thing, and then they're happy to get that thing delivered by who you give it to. All right, so let's talk now a little bit about who you need, okay? Now, we've talked about business flow. You always have to keep in mind that you want to get the most qualified, least expensive person to do the work in the company. So that means you don't want to, again, overhire. You want to be thinking about, do I need to have someone at a lower level do this work? Can I get away with, economically, a lower level employee doing this work? And if the answer is no, then you have to monetize whoever it is that you are hiring to do the work. So you can't just go out and hire a person and say, this person's going to eat my profit. I've got X dollars in the bank, so therefore I can afford. Every person that you hire needs to be making a multiple of their salary in economic value to the business in order for you to justify hiring them. So we have very specific financial models that we will run our clients through when it is the I need to make a hire time, so that you're not hiring from a guess or a thought, your thought, that 3 to 4 ratio, that 75% is what's going to initiate. But ultimately, then you need to actually go into the planning process. Now, the planning process will lead you to one very specific planning tool that we'll talk about now, which is the culture scorecard. So when it's time to hire a person, who is going to be that person, right? We all go to aptitude. We all ask the question, can the person file the motion, write the document, argue in court, etc. But I want you to expand your repertoire, and I want you to think about 3 key characteristics that are necessary in order to assemble a great team, and that is that you need to be looking at their attitude, their aptitude, and their cultural fit for your company. So their attitude is how they like to work. How do they approach work in general? That's not approach life. Some people approach life very differently than they approach work. But are they generally somebody who's pleasant, right? Not everybody needs to be pleasant. If you're going to stick a file clerk in a corner somewhere, they need to be nice to you, but they don't need to be nice in general, right? Are they somebody that approaches tasks with an interest in learning? Some people, they know what they know, and that's all you're going to get. Other people, they have a voracious appetite to figure things out. There's somebody who always overextends themselves. Sometimes you want that person. Other times you want somebody who's a little protective of their field. Whoa, I got stuff to do, right? I need to make sure I'm only doing what I'm doing, not what you're doing. So whatever your value system is, you need to identify that in the attitude criteria of the hire. And then, of course, we get to the aptitude. That part's pretty easy, right? If you are a lawyer and you know what's required for lawyering, you typically want to make sure that the person can actually be a good lawyer. Little key point here, always think about hiring up the food chain. I know people don't like to hear that. People like to hear, I'm going to hire somebody like an associate who's going to help me, as opposed to hire somebody who's more experienced than me. But you will get a lot more traction out of people who are more experienced because, one, they are economically worth more. You are going to pay more for them, and they will appreciate being paid more. And they're typically going to give you more value, and they're also going to save you the time to manage them. You have to manage all people, but a person who doesn't know anything about how to practice law is going to take up a lot more of your time than a person who can practice law independently. And then finally, you want to think about your cultural fit. Are you somebody who walks around cursing all the time? Are you somebody who likes to wear pajamas to the office? Are you somebody who, likes to hang out and joke with your employees? Or maybe you like to eat pizza with your employees? Or are you really buttoned up? You like to be in your formal attire. You like to be in a very posh workplace. You like everyone to be quiet in the workspace. Think about that, because when people are in their zone of genius, you want them to be their best self. If you hire someone who's really buttoned up and you stick them in a jeans culture, they are probably going to have more adaptation issues trying to fit who you are than being their best self in who they are. And that is far more important, particularly in today's workspace, than it has ever been before. Because now people have an expectation at work. We all went through this great resignation. In the law industry, actually, looks like we hit it before everybody else did. But people said, fuck that noise, pardon my French. They don't want to be in a space that doesn't fit them. They don't want to be kind of hamstrung into being some version of what you want. They want to be who they want to be. So best practices is hire someone who's already that. And there are probably far more people who are like you than not, at least in terms of culture, if you create a strong, sustainable culture. So we are at the 22-minute mark at this point. I want to give you guys the benefit of the culture scorecard. So if you're interested in getting it, you can go to our website at lawfirmmentor.net/culture-scorecard, and you can get a copy of that. So let's entertain some questions. We didn't get to delegation, but again, it's in the slide deck. We have some very specific detailed parts about that. We can spend some time on that. I can answer some direct questions, and then we're going to talk a little bit more about how LFM can help you with these things.
So does anybody have any questions? No one's posted any in the chat yet, but if you have one, go ahead and type it in the chat. Ask her literally anything. So Megan, yes.
Oh, sorry.
If you're remote, how do you figure out if they fit a culture?
So here's the thing. Your remote culture is a very specific type of culture, but it is still your culture, right? You're still going to meet this person, whether you meet the person on Zoom or you meet the person in person. You're ultimately going to be asking them questions about how they work. You're going to be asking questions about their value system, and you're going to make sure that things that are your non-negotiables fit their non-negotiables. So for instance, if in your culture, if you're in a remote culture, you are probably doing some things to curate your culture. You have maybe a Slack channel, or perhaps you have Teams, but there's some way for people to communicate. Some people like to schedule a meeting when it's time to communicate, right? I gotta learn something that means I need to sit down with a human to get my questions answered and have an exchange. Well, there are other people that are really worn out by that. So if you go hire somebody who is going to work for Susie Smith, senior lawyer, who has to have a face-to-face meeting to talk through issues, and this person is very insular and very much likes to see things in writing, to think about them, to process them, to come back to them, well, there's a misfit there. Now, there may be a misfit that is one that both people can adapt to, or it may be a misfit that is a non-starter, right? So then you want to start asking about behavioral questions. Well, how have you worked with managers in the past? How have you, when you've had someone who likes to work in a different style, perhaps you like to do things on paper and someone else likes to do them in person, how have you fit your style with theirs, and how have you had people, if at all, fit their style to yours, right? So you're really going to be exploring from a behavioral interviewing style how you are going to see how the person can work for your culture and whether or not those things are going to work for you. Do you recommend using aptitude testing for new hires? So when you say aptitude testing, and this is to Laura, can you clarify that? Are you talking about well, let me say something first, and then I'll ask you to clarify. So one of the things I always highly recommend when you are interviewing people in particular is that you always want to get a on-the-job test of a person. And when I say on-the-job, that doesn't mean you have to hire them for a week and give them dummy files to work on. Some people do that. That's fine if you do that. That can be very effective for you. But quick and dirty is put somebody in the throes of doing the job during the interview. So person comes in and they are applying to be a receptionist. Well, what are they going to be doing? They're going to be talking on the phone. But they're probably not going to be talking on the phone with a well-rehearsed script that they're going to be saying over and over again. They're going to be talking on the phone with one person when another person calls in and somebody walks up to their desk. You want to replicate that. and you want to see them perform in that scenario. Quick example of that works very well. In my office, we're a litigation firm, and I at one point was hiring someone for our child abuse division. And in that division, it is not uncommon that somebody would call me on Monday and they would have court on Tuesday for the state to take their child away. And you would have presented to you somewhere in the range of 3 to 5 inches of documents and allegations against this person that you would have 5, maybe 10 minutes to read before someone would be testifying and you would have to cross-examine them. And that little story about, oh, you can't ever ask a question that you don't know the answer to, that's bullshit. If somebody's child is going into foster care, anything that you ask cannot hurt the situation any worse. They already have their case made against you. So it's kind of a free-for-all, which is great. It's a lot of fun to try cases that way. But you have to have the moxie to try cases that way. So when I would interview someone, if they seemed like they were good, I would start giving them factual scenarios. I'd say, here's a notepad, here's a pen. I want to give you some facts, and then I'm going to give you a factual scenario. And my colleague here, so-and-so, is going to be the caseworker who's going to testify, and I want you to cross-examine them. And they're given maybe 5 or 10 facts that we have. And beyond that, they really have to go from their gut. They have to test their instincts. They have to take the information they've heard. They have to take the facts that we've given them, and they have to turn them around in our favor on their feet, on the fly, in that moment. Why? Because that's the job. That's what they're going to be required to do. It doesn't need to be perfect. I don't need to know that you're going to ask America's next top best question. I just need to know that you can ask questions and that you feel comfortable doing that. And if you don't, this is not the job for you. Now, I've gotten any number of responses to this. Usually there's a, oh my God, I need time to prepare. That's not how we work here. You don't get time to prepare in this particular type of case, right? So see how that works for you. And some people do very well, and I've obviously hired people that way. And other people start crying. And I've obviously invited those people to have a nice day. But whatever you do, you ultimately want to see it in real time. Someone else mentioned testing, like the Myers-Briggs. I use a test called the Real Talent Hiring Assessment. I can put the link to that in the comment section, but it actually spits out a report that gives you some under the hood look at the candidate. So you can actually think about the candidate more than how they perform or how they are presenting themselves, but what are their thought processes? How are they going to approach life in the world? These are more static testing. They don't change like your DISC score can change. They're a little bit more in the nature of like a Colby. The cognitive skills components of the Colby, pardon me, are a little bit more stable. So that's the kind of thing you want to be looking for. You want to be looking for something that is not going to transfer over time, because you want to know who this person is going to show up as in your business. All right, I see another question.
Rebecca's asking, how do you monetize purely admin roles? Is it just the amount of income generating time they free up for the attorneys?
So it can be that. That typically is the principal area. Like, what are they going to be doing that is going to create economic value? That's the question, right? So normally you would look at what is not being billed or produced as value, right? And then when I say produced as value, I mean that in the context of flat fees or contingency cases. If you're an hourly firm, it's how much is not being billed and collected. But ultimately, you want to ask, how much economic value are we missing as a result of not having this administrative role? And then when that person gets in here, how are you going to be able to economically create that? So it could be you're going to be able to bill more hours. Could be you're going to have someone that's going to collect more dollars directly, right? So you're hiring somebody to hop on the phone and reduce your AR. Could be it's going to be somebody who's going to be able to market for you. You're missing opportunities to get in front of people with your message because everybody is lawyering full-time or paralegaling full-time or what have you. So you have to just think about what is going to be the economic result of hiring the person. And then you actually have to build that out in a system. So in other words, don't just say, if I hire this file clerk, my paralegal will be free to bill more hours. You actually have to quantify that, right? So how many hours are actually spent by the paralegal currently on file clerk work? And then when you add that file clerk in, how many more hours will you be requiring of your paralegal to bill and collect to pay at least 3 to 5 times what that file clerk is costing you, so that you don't get into a situation where you just add a person and say, oh, this is going to work because now I'll have more time to X. And you take your time to X and you put it into Y, which has less economic value. All right, so looks like we've gotten through our questions. Any more questions? Happy to field more questions.
I am actually floored that you have a child abuse division because I avoid those cases like the plague. But obviously it's your firm, you can do what you want. And that's one thing to take away from Allison's as well. Obviously, you don't have to model the firm exactly after hers. And some people enjoy, I don't know if enjoy is the word, but they're good at high conflict cases. If you know that you hate them and it just every time you open the file, you just want to die. Don't do that. And I learned that a long time ago. That is me. That is me. So I trained my answering service. If they heard the word DFACS, which means Department of Family and Children Services in Georgia, we refer them out. I don't read the word DFACS. I ain't touching it. I just can't do it. It's price of peace. So at this point, I've tried to really, really niche down to older people that have money, they're getting divorced and their kids are grown. It's all about money. And I sleep at night because no one starves to death, but that's just me.
Yeah, I hear you. And, there are definitely people that feel that way. It is what I would consider to be a labor of love for me to do this work. I consider it to be God's work to get children out of foster care. There's a whole backstory as to how I landed in this work, but the most important thing for me when I started doing this work is to do it profitably. So I've never done it through the state. I've never gotten $50 an hour to do it. It's high quality work. It deserves the same compensation that you get for getting folks divorced or getting them out of restraining orders or getting them restraining orders or whatever else that they need in the family part.
You're right. And people, I don't think, recognize that. I think they think of it's sort of kind of like at the lower end of the scale. But what's more important than like losing your kid to foster care? I just emotionally don't have the bandwidth to do it. But a lot of people are just not really focusing on that because they feel like there's not money in it. And they just kind of, there's like a whole untapped area, I think, in Georgia that people are being ignored. But
yeah. So, Regina, I don't know how you feel about this. Do you want to take some time and go back and talk about the delegation piece if people don't have questions at this point?
Oh, yeah, sure. We can talk about delegation.
Okay. So I will share my screen.
So Laura's asking, can you give an example of the calculations that support new hires? So that's a lot of math, and she probably could talk for hours on that alone. But do you want to give like a teaser?
Well, so let me think about that. What I would normally tell people to do, let me just kind of, no, it's okay, Laura. We can, there's a program. I'm going to just ask you to email me at info@lawformentor.net, and I will pull the slide deck from another program that actually walks through the math. But here's the gist of it. So you want to think about, there's lots of different ways to approach it. So if you're approaching it from a flat fee perspective, it's different than if you're approaching it from a billable hour perspective, but you start from the same place. You always want to start from, okay, flat fee. So you always want to start from the place of what would be the hourly rate? If you were doing this work by the hour, what would be the hourly rate of the person that you want to hire? Okay. I'm going to use a paralegal, for example, because that's usually the hire that people either start with, or that when they are stacking revenue and they're trying to increase profit, that's where you're going to get the most profitable return, especially when you are growing, right? Growing, scaling like this, as opposed to a slower incline. So you want to think about the hourly rate you're going to charge a person. Let's say you're going to charge your paralegal out at $200 an hour. Okay. If you have a paralegal at $200 an hour, the first thing you want to think about is what is going to be the required production for that person. Okay. Now, let's say you're going to require the person to work 30 hours a week, and half of that time is going to be billed. Okay. So this is, again, not a full-time hire. It can be a full-time hire, but we're not going to like complicate things by having to talk about benefits and things like that. We're just going to talk about straight hours. So at $200 an hour, if you have somebody who is billing 15 hours a week, they're going to produce a gross revenue of $3,000. Now that's gross revenue. You would have to ultimately collect that. If you're flat fee, hopefully you're collecting 100% of your fees up front. Some people do it by stages, so they may have some AR, but generally speaking, you're talking about getting paid up front. So $3,000 a week is what their economic opportunity is, right? That's how much time they are putting in at what economic value to give you an opportunity. If they are working 46 weeks in a year, and I'm taking 6 weeks out for a certain number of holidays, a certain amount of PTO, a certain amount of labor time that isn't really captured. Maybe it's times you're doing firm lunches. Maybe it's time you're kicking off early before on a Friday before holiday, things like that. But overall, we tend to give somewhere between 48 to 46 weeks is the range of what people are actually working in the course of a year. Over a year, if someone is quantifying economic value of 15 hours a week times $200 an hour times 46 weeks, their opportunity is $138,000. For most people, you are not going to pay a paralegal $138,000, okay? But let's assume that we are going to be a really under-collecting law firm. Let's say you have a really, really bad AR problem, and let's say you're only getting 70% of what you ultimately bill to a person. Now, again, I know you're flat fee. We're gonna shift it over to flat fee in just a moment, okay? If you're collecting 70% of that 138 economic value, you're at $96,600. So you're still not going to pay a paralegal $96,000 in most places, especially because this person is part-time. This person's not even working full-time for you, okay? So that $96,000, well, where is that going to come from? Most people would say, well, if that's what the person would be producing hourly, how are they going to produce that in a flat fee context, right? Because that's your model. So you have to think about how you are pricing your services and ultimately what I would refer to as the time on desk. Now, time on desk is typically a metric that you hear about in contingency practices. Most personal injury attorneys have heard that term before, but flat fee attorneys should think about it too, because if I have $10,000 cases, I've got $50,000 of opportunity that I can't move through to get to the next opportunity until I have worked through and handled all of those cases start to finish. So if I finish those cases in 1 month, I made $50,000 in a month. If I don't finish those cases until 6 weeks, then I have already cut myself down to 37.5 in the course of a month. Does everyone understand the math on that? That the faster you get your work done.
It's a mind fuck, but yeah.
Yeah, the faster you get your work done, the more work you can do, right? So you want to have obviously a very systematized law firm to be most efficient and most profitable with flat fees. But you want to figure out how much work can a paralegal get done. And that goes back to what we started with at the beginning of the program, Laura, which is your SKU, having an itemization of everything start to finish in every phase of every type of case in your law firm, so that you can say, generally speaking, here's what is required to move a case start to finish, or if you sell by phases, move a phase start to finish. And once we have that, we can then say who should be doing that work. So if a paralegal is only required for 1/3 of one phase of a case, and we're going to sell 40 of those phases, then you only need 1/3 of 40 of those cases for your paralegal. So you're thinking about this in terms of time that they're going to need to put into your cases. Now, when you start to see that you have more capacity, you have more ability to sell more cases, that's when you say, okay, how many more cases do I need to sell of the total value of the case, right? So if your case is a $10,000 case versus a $50,000 case, you put that value, you run it through a very sophisticated model, right? I'm giving you the simplified version of the model because I don't have the spreadsheet in front of me. This is the gist of the model, okay? But you're going to run it through that process and say, okay, here's how many hours my cases take. I have this much capacity to bring in more cases. Here is how much is allocated to the paralegal of that total case time. And that then is economic value of X, okay? Now, you never want to hire a person for the exact amount of economic value, or else you wouldn't be making any profit. So you want to be thinking about, is it 1/3 of that economic value? Is it maybe 20%? Is it 25%? You want to think about that relative to your marketplace, because different marketplaces cost more for labor. Probably going to pay more for a paralegal in New York City than you'd pay in, East Bumfuck, Alabama. Pardon me, anybody is here from Alabama. I always pick on Alabama because I grew up right next.
So if you're not from Bumfuck, Alabama, you shouldn't be offended.
Okay, so maybe I should say Florida because I grew up in Florida, so I can talk about it all I want. So, but ultimately you want to choose your economic value. And then once you have your economic value, you want to figure out what you're ultimately going to hire in terms of experience of your paralegal, and you're going to compare those two. Okay. Again, that's a very gistist answer. That is not a very precise answer, but that is as precise as I can be off the cuff without a financial model and without your numbers with me in order to give you that. But I hope that that made sense. Laura, let me know generally, good. She's telling me that's helpful. So I'm getting the sense that we can shift back to delegation now. So I did want to talk about delegation because I know that this is something that a lot of people struggle with. I'm going to just start my screen share again. And again, questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. I'll try to get them after we get through this portion. All right. So there are 5 P's of delegation, okay? These I have formulated so that you have something simplified to think about when you think about the most important aspects of delegating in a law firm. So the first P is purpose. Purpose is, what is the end goal? Before you delegate anything, you need to ask yourself what you want on the other side of it. Sometimes you want something very specific. You want a motion filed. You want a document drafted. You want a telephone call placed. You want a notification to an adversary, right? But you always want to think about who is to do what by when. And that does not come until after you know what you want. Okay, so most times we start getting things off of our desk. Okay, hey, can you just file this? Can you just write this? Can you just organize this, etc.? And we don't stop and say, what is the end goal? Sometimes the end goal is, again, a task. But if you are really trying to get to a place where your business runs without you, you need to get to a place where there is not just a delegation in a moment of a thing, but the delegation of responsibility to a person who will not just do this thing today, but who will get into the habit of doing these things systemically, consistently, without your having to delegate. In other words, go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut it. You
No,
keep going. I thought you were at the end of the sentence. You weren't.
No. I mean, it was just more of the same. It's like you're trying to get to not just doing it today, but doing it always, doing it consistently and reliably without my having to tell you.
Correct. And I've seen a lot of business owners struggle with, they're just flabbergasted when they give someone a task and someone just does the task. Yeah. It's like, well, that's honestly a you problem because you didn't explain. So if you just put a task on your task list, hey, draft discovery, and then 2 weeks later, you're like, oh, what happened to that discovery? And then you look and it's drafted, but nothing else happened. That's on you. So right. There really just has to be a whole lot of steps. And at this point with my paralegal, I can now just say draft discovery because she knows what drafting discovery means. Look at the complaint, look at the initial notes from the client, draft discovery based on those things, then task it to me to review, set a reminder if I haven't reviewed it within 10 days. Then after I review it, post it to the client to review. And then after she reviews it, and then it gets filed. And then the rule 5.2, which you don't need what that is, that gets filed. But she knows that those are all of the things that flow from drafting discovery. So at some point, you have to kind of step it out, step by step. I think there's like this test where someone says, explain how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And people always skip steps. You have to write every single step down. And at some point it will become like clockwork for your people. But in the beginning, you have to make it very, very granular. And then once it starts to flow, it'll start to flow.
Yeah, to that last point that you just said, Regina, one of the things that I always give people as a little acronym is what I refer to as the state of art, ART, which is ask, record, transcribe. Like, that your person who is doing it exceedingly well, that you don't know all the things that they're doing because they're doing things that you don't even know that they're doing, and you're happy with that person. When you go hire another person, you think you can tell them ABC. You oftentimes don't even know what goes into the job that your paraprofessional secretary, paralegal is doing. So it's really, really good to get the person who is doing a meticulous job to actually say to you, hey, here's what I'm doing, and to tell it to you, and then get it transcribed so you have a ready-made system on the quick and dirty, right? So without you having to go through a formulaic process, which we'll talk about. Okay, so after you get to purpose, you have to then plan, okay? So this is, again, big picture. Are you delegating a task or are you delegating authority? And the beautiful thing is when you delegate authority, you delegate buy-in, right? That naturally comes with authority. When you give people power, and I don't mean power that they can just run your business without you, but I mean the power over their desk. They own their desk, they own the responsibility. For Regina's example, they own discovery, right? They will get into the habit of thinking, now I don't just have to get this done, I have to get the task, the system, the process done to achieve Again, back to number one, the purpose, right? That's why you start with the purpose so that you can tell them what the purpose is of what you're giving them. And then when you give them the authority over that purpose, then it becomes I've got to get this done, not I have to do what I'm told. So a lot of us do the task delegation, right? Do what you're told. And people do what they're told. And there is oftentimes a consequence from control freaks if they ever step out of what they're told. So that's a reason why a lot of people don't do more than the task. And you say, any idiot knows that I wanted this filed somewhere. I didn't just want you to prepare it. I wanted you to do something with it, right? They don't know that because in some workplaces, they are only allowed to do the task. And in other workplaces, they are given the authority to complete the project.
And sometimes they're afraid of getting yelled at because they've been in a situation where they did what they thought was the natural next step. And their particular boss wanted to look at every single thing before the next step. So you can't assume that people know anything beyond what you tell them, unless you tell them.
Right. So you have to get into the habit of doing that, even if it doesn't feel like you, quote, should. Okay. So throw the shoulds out the door. Don't should all over your employees. You have to get into the habit of communicating about this stuff. Now, 3 is what most people think of when they think of delegation. It's the process, okay? The process of delegation is the step-by-step. Now, what I put here in terms of a process is actually our process to teach people how to create systems in law firms. And I'm going to run through it so that you can see through the process of creating a process, how a person can ultimately get all of what they need into a process. Okay, there was a lot of P's in there. Here's the thing, you always want to know what is the category of activity that they're engaged in, right? So when we talk about creating processes in law firms, we talk about the domains of law firms, right? There's an area in your business that's dedicated to sales, an area for marketing, an area for people, an area for legal work, an area for communications, facilities, and money management, right? So that's like the big umbrella. Like, what's the umbrella that you're dealing with? When you're talking about your staff, could be legal work, right? You got an area for dealing with paperwork, an area for dealing with correspondence, an area for dealing with client communications, an area for dealing with inter-office communications, right? You want to have those broken out. Then you get to the what. What is to be accomplished? That is, again, going back to the purpose, but you want the purpose actually in your written system about whatever the activity is so that they can be mindful that they're not just doing a task. There is a reason. If they don't know the reason why, it's going to be hard for them to develop a gut of, hey, we're not doing X right now, but it would really benefit us if we started to add this additional thing over here. They can't think that way without understanding what they are ultimately trying to do that's going to benefit the business. All right, number 3 is the why. All right, the why is somewhat like the purpose, but the why is ultimately why it is done a particular way. Right? Why do you want it this way, not that way? Because a lot of times people get into does it really matter if I file this document first and then call the client, or can I just call the client and then file it? Well, no, we do it this way in this order because fill in the blank. If they know that fill in the blank, again, there's going to be something that comes up in your business that you have not contemplated. There's going to be something in the practice of law, something in a new practice area, something in changes to the law that you are not going to contemplate, that they can contemplate for you, owning that authority, if you give them enough of the explanation of why they are doing things so that they can start to understand it at a granular level. All right, more on process. You want key responsibilities. These need to be delineated. They need to be well defined, right? What are the essentials? You want the essentials spelled out because someone is at some point in time going to get busy and is going to skip over a period or a comma or a semicolon. And that is going to drive you crazy. But the beautiful thing is they are not skipping over things like words and paragraphs and essential components, right? They're not skipping over things that would make or break a case. They're not committing malpractice. If someone is going to forget something, I would rather than forget a period somewhere, assuming it didn't commit malpractice, than having them forget things like, hey, I forgot that I was supposed to send this to a client, and now a client doesn't know that I filed their thing. And now they're suing me because they think I did something wrong. Okay. 5, necessary tasks, right? Key responsibilities need to be broken down into tasks. And then each of those need to be assigned to a person. This is within your system. You always need to assign activity to people. Because if it's everyone's job, it's no one's job, right? It shouldn't be that the paralegals do this. It should be paralegal 1 does X, paralegal 2 does Y. Or each paralegal assigned to a case is responsible for. People need a lane. If you don't give them a lane, if you stick a whole bunch of people in a lane, everyone will assume it's somebody else's job, or then you're going to have people fighting over who did what when, and people are going to have their hands in a pie that's going to get real messy. Now, once you have assigned a person, you always need to keep in mind there should always be a backup person. That person can be someone else on your team, or for a lot of us that are in high growth mode, it can be the person you've not yet hired. Yes, you can absolutely assign to someone who's not in the building. Why would you do that? Well, for most of us, it's because we are creating what we desire to create. And if you don't create what you desire to create, what you end up doing is creating more of what you already have, which for some of you is great. You love what you have. Most of us want more than what we have right now. So you always want to write down as a part of your system, you're going to have a person to do something. And if that person is in the building, great. If that person is not in the building, great. That puts a call on you to go hire that person, however you have to get there. It's a part of the planning process. Then once you have your system, you want to make sure you have checked it. And that person who checks it needs to be the person who did not write it. So someone who's not involved, who reads it and says, yeah, we forgot to put bread on our peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Oh yeah, we forgot to cut the crust off of our peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Oh crap, we forgot to put saran wrap on our peanut butter and jelly sandwich before we put it into our book bag, right? Whatever it is, somebody should be looking at it that is not too close to it. And then finally, you want to do periodic reviews. You want to make sure that the review of your system, the review of your process is done on a regular schedule after you've created it. Because as you make changes, you want to make sure those changes are working. You don't want to wait until something falls apart to say, oh crap, we shouldn't be doing it this way. We should be doing it that way. Learning through malpractice is a really hard way to learn.
Yeah, you don't want to do that.
Don't want to do that. Okay.
So when you're giving feedback too on these meetings, I think it's helpful to give positive and negative feedback. I usually start with positive. So as you're going through, and so sometimes my paralegal will do something, it just kind of blows my mind. I make sure that I note it. And then when we start our weekly review of, hey, it was really cool that you did this. I didn't ask you to do this. And this helped me in this way. Thank you so much. I feel like that's helpful too. And then if it's a step that you have figured out that they have added that you haven't even thought of and that is helpful to the process, you can say, this is great. I didn't even think about that. We are adding this to our standard procedure now of how we do things.
Yeah, that is our 5th P. We're going to get to it in just a moment.
Oh, sorry.
No.
Is there praise? I don't know. There are a lot of P's.
It is not praise. You will see.
Oh, okay.
Quick provision is tools needed to do the job, right? Sometimes we want a solution that is hard, clunky, time consuming, etc. You want to make sure you're giving them the most efficient way to do it. And then finally, our last P is punchline. How did it go, right? Now, the punchline does not have to wait until the end of the project. Depending on how big your project is, you can be checking in with your person as you go. And yes, you want to be catching them doing things right, as you are also identifying things that they need to improve upon. Because we do learn from reinforcement. And all of us, whether we are hardwired to desire it or we simply like it when we get it, all of us like those attaboys and attagirls. So you want to make sure that that is a part of the process, and so that they don't get discouraged when they hear, oh, we need to improve upon this for next time. They will also be hearing A, B, and C went fabulously well. Thank you so much for that. I can see you're learning. D needs a little bit of work. Let's tweak it. Let's see how we can modify this. And now let's go to E and F. Fabulous job with those as well. D is just the only thing that we're going to come back to. We're going to try that a little bit different next time. Okay. So again, when we're talking about delegation, it's really, really important that everyone understand that the people that you have in your orbit are going to help you to create the business that you desire. But a lot of us are stuck in our own way. And we're stuck in our own way because we're stuck in patterns and practices. And a lot of us go to the well at great resources like Lawyer on the Beach, and we ask people, hey, how do you do this? But the problem is the people who are telling you how to do X are oftentimes not aware of the 10 things you did before or the 15 things you plan to do afterward. So what you normally get is you get great strategies that may or may not work for what you are trying to create. They may or may not help you to create the life that you desire. So it's really important that you actually plan for the life that you have in store for yourself. So one of the things that I want you guys to have available to you is the full slide deck. As I said before, there's a lot in here. This is about 70 slides. We only went through a few of them that kind of give you, one, how you should approach this, two, how to get the right people, three, how to delegate to those people, and then ultimately the next major step, which is how to create the plan around it all. Now, one of the tools that we have here at Law Firm Mentor is we do at the end of the year a very low-cost virtual program called Create Your Plan. And the Create Your Plan program is all about creating your plan for next year. It comes with your own pre-templated PDF so that you can plug and play with different numbers on how you're planning to create your revenue, who are the people that you believe that you're going to need. And we'll talk you through, do you need a person at the high level? Do you need a person to assist? Do you need a person who really is just an administrative person to get things moving? And then we talk you through ultimately, how are you going to achieve those goals through your sales and your marketing objectives? The Create Your Plan is essentially a business plan for you for the following year, because most of us plan the next year. We don't plan 5 years out. We don't plan 10 years out. We might dream that far out, but we're usually not planning that far out. And we can help you with that. And for those of you that are looking to do something more, if you are looking to create something more, if you're looking to think further ahead for yourself, last thing that I will leave you with is that you can always hop on a call with us. These are not sales calls, okay? The purpose of them is to evaluate if you are a fit for us and if we are a fit for you, which means you have a conversation where a growth strategist on my team actually walks through your business. So there's a lot of information that you give us so that we can actually diagnose, do you have a sales problem? Do you have a people problem? Do you have a marketing problem? Or do you have a combination of all of them? And if so, where should you start? And we have those conversations with no obligation. And for a lot of people, they have reported back to us, just having that conversation allowed us to then evaluate what makes sense for my business. What do I want to do with my business? Am I on the right track with my business? And if not, when and if I should pursue coaching. Coaching for me is very much a labor of love. It's very much like my child abuse practice. It's the thing that people said, oh, why would you do that? You know, you're making money doing blah, 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 blah. Why would you choose to change the scope of your life now? And one of the reasons why, for me, this became really important is because when I started to actually work with coaches, and I still have one, I still have a life coach, I still have a business coach for each of my businesses, someone looking in from the outside telling me what I can do better, how I can do it better, how I can do it more efficiently, it allowed me to create a much better life. So I now have two multiple seven-figure companies. My income is much closer personally to 7 figures than 6 figures. I enjoy more of my time. I have much more freedom, and I get to help beautiful people all the time do the things that they want to do with their life. For me, that's the greatest gift in the world. So that is the reason why I am both a law firm owner and a business coach. And for those of you that are interested in either of those things, please feel free to reach out to me.
Are there any, I don't see any other questions. Thank you, Allison. Everyone else, we will post the YouTube video probably sometimes this weekend. If I get a chance. Simone Biles is competing, so I have to watch the greatest of all time do lots of flips, but I'll try to get out this weekend. Thank you so much, Allison. This is very informative. I've put the links in the chat if you all want to grab that, and I'll also include them in the description of the YouTube video, so you all can get them then. And you all, everyone have a great weekend.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.